So this is a topic I feel like a lot of people struggle with, and that goes for myself as well. Um, I think I think it's just become like a very common thing that a lot of people kind of even just at times the most you know talented people even kind of struggle with too, and it's definitely it's definitely just something that I kind of, you know, at times wrestle with, like from, especially, during this season. I try to, I tried to kind of replace that with, just kind of with just volunteering with at other places at, like, um, at, there was like this construction there was like this place at Pasadena. Like I usually go there to kind of to sort of just kind of take my mind away from school and just kind of like do something. Or I try to replace that with like finding work, and if that doesn't work, then that's when I try to do that. Or just kind of like help out my family. Try to whenever they need me, because I have relatives nearby in the area, so I try to help out as much as I can. So trying to keeping myself busy, right? That's what I kind of do to kind of replace those thoughts of of procrastinating or even just being lazy. But I think when it comes to procrastinating, I think it's a little bit different than laziness, because when it comes to like procrastination, it's like trying to it's like you're trying to delay you know reaching a certain a certain goal that you might have. Or you know it could be not having the intention, making that goal intentional, as in like it's not as as well, I guess that kind of like refers to laziness a little bit, but it's like you're not making that goal as intentional as you thought. And that's something that I often find myself in that sort of like that sort of route, because I think because it definitely does require a lot of hard work. It definitely does require a lot of 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 you know placing placing you know keeping track of your progress, uh, making sure that you're ahead of your progress, and like as in like making, as in like writing stuff down, or just recording yourself, like recording this small little like bits and tweaks here and there, or even just like placing limits on yourself, and placing or even like kind of arranging some things, rearranging, reinforcing some changes along the way, because when it comes to like having a certain goal, it does require a lot, and out of you specifically, because you definitely are going to see a change within yourself, like. And that's the big thing that a lot of people are afraid of, is changing oneself, like their habits, their mindset, their behavior, their perce- their their perspective on like on life. And you might even physically change as well, and a lot. And I think that's the one thing that even I myself even kind of find myself being, afraid of. It's just change in general, because you, it definitely does, definitely does, require a lot of, hard work, a lot of commitment, and a lot of determination as well. But it does, help. It does, um, it does kind of like make you feel like you have to change in a way, where it's not like, you just, I want to change, but I also have, I also have to change, and it's like a duty. And so that's the one thing that I, struggled with a lot, is like making my goals into something that has to like actually happen, compared to a lot of people, where, like they have to get this business, or they have to, they have to get a family by 30 years old, or get married by 30 years old, or they have to get out of their parents' place, or, they have to, they have to be, even just going to the gym, like, they have to reach this body type by this time, it's kind of like that, like, for example, like, for me, I like to work out, I like to I like to, well, right now I'm just, I like to work out at home, but, I, I like to, back then I used to like going to like in the gym, you know, consistently, and, definitely, it's, the first time I tried it, it was like, the worst, the experience that I've had, but, you know, it was, it was for, a certain reason, which is like kind of like challenging myself mentally, and just wanting to build muscle. So, that's why I started working out. That's why I had my own trainer. That's why, I, I made the decision to work with, a trainer for, for the next, I guess, couple of months, so that I could just see, where I'm at. And, obviously I had to, they gave me some advice. They gave me a lot of, resources. They gave me, but they also gave me like some, some, some advice, such as like, in terms of like, my nutrition, in terms of like, you know, um, like my form, or in terms of like, of, like what you should be, what you should be doing, throughout the day, like, basically just like eating, because, the thing is with me, like I have a very, fast metabolism, so it's like I can't really gain as much weight. I struggle with that a lot, which is why like I'm very skinny. Um, but yeah, gaining weight is like was like the hardest part for me, and I knew that was a problem. I knew that I had to, work hard at that. Just being able to eat, pretty much a lot more than I'm comfortable with. So that was just one big thing that was one setback, that was kind of like, delaying me from my goal. And and I feel like a lot of us kind of have that. A lot of us experience, setbacks, because it's one of the things that kind of holds us back from, reaching that, intentional goal, because, we say that we're gonna do something one day, and then the next day it gets even harder, because, you know it's always, because that's kind of like how it is when it comes to, to reaching our goals. And it's a lot easier to kind of just, quit right while you're at it, right? So that's why, most people quit, wanting to, work out, and they kind of just wait till, eventually, when they, whenever they get, when something happens, and so, and or mostly it's just due to like, kind of like life circumstances, where they can't be able to work out. They don't have that much time to work out as much as they should, and they kind of just, put a halt on that for now, until they have time later on, until it seems more convenient. Um, but but that's just one example. I'm not gonna try to go off tangent here, um, but yeah, like I think the difference, between like the two when it comes to like, when it comes to procrastination and like laziness, I think like when it comes to procrastination, it's like you're kind of like delaying, you know, yourself from wanting to reach like a goal that seems like to have intention behind it, where you kind of just like, do all these other things that kind of like distract you from where you want to be, what you want to do, what you need to do. Um, and that's what and that's why we kind of like we either let life circumstances kind of get in the way. We let our other priorities kind of stop us from reaching those goals, or we just kind of let we just don't really, or sometimes we just don't really believe like those goals are worth having anymore, um, because we kind of we just kind of put a pin in it, and just because we believe other things are more important, and because of that, we often kind of look the year when the years go by, we often kind of look back on those things, and realize that we could have we could I could have done that, but just because of life, we weren't able to. So um and that's totally, I think that's totally the norm that we all that we all experience. So including myself, like I even for me, like I often tell myself, like I often like think about it for a while, and then about something that I want, and then I do it, and then like when something happens, it's like, what, maybe I can just put a pin in that, and just focus on like on what I'm doing right now, so that eventually when I have time, I'll get back to it later. But that's not always, it's not always guaranteed, right? Because just due to life, so yeah, so for me, when it comes to procrastination, I think my biggest weakness is that I'm way too easily distracted in life. As in, like I choose, like I try to like maintain a certain thing. Like when I have one thing in mind, it's like it kind of gets in a way boring. Like no it almost has like no flavor to it. Like it's like, for example, like when I want to work out, it's like when I want to have like a really good body shape, it's like you have to kind of like change yourself, change who you are in a way to kind of get to where you want to be, like and that's why I thought just because you have like the perfect, yeah, you have like like the perfect start, and you have the perfect body to kind of reach that goal. Like you have all these opportunities, or you have this like advantage. It doesn't always mean that you're gonna expectedly reach that goal if you're not willing to go through, unless you're willing to go through the hard stuff, sort of like having that discipline to kind of get there. And it's definitely not easy. I mean that's why for me, it's not just having like a goal, it's having a reasonable goal where that you can do for it's something that you can sort of like maintain for yourself. And I think that's one of the things that I that's one of the things that I kind of like had a hard time like accepting. It was having like a reasonable goal in mind, where you might not look you might not look like a certain way, or you might not be this person like a year from now, or maybe 2 years from now. It might take a long time, and that's another thing. Like, time is basically, it's not always on our side, but it's there for us to sort of reach that reasonable goal. Or if we just kind of reach for a goal in general, and it's, obviously it's going to be hard, but it's like, if it's not a reasonable one, then it's like, it's like, why are we doing it in the first place? Like, we have to kind of go back to why we started this journey, and why we're trying to achieve that. So that's that's something that I had to accept, and had to understand, because like, a goal is something that you can like, there's like 6 stages of like kind of like like, when it comes to like because I'm a kin major, so it's like it's kind of there's kind of like weird that I kind of find these certain you know ways to like of like learning something of like there's like these 6 stages where it's like you kind of like have this moment where you kind of pre-contemplate, where you kind of think about it for a bit, and you kind of contemplate on it, where you kind of actually think about it some more, and actually make some some arrangements, and some you know decisions. I mean, hold on. I think I can, if I look this up right now, I can be able to. Hold on 1 second. Yeah. Oh yeah. See the stages of change, pretty much. And so yeah, basically, it's like at the first moment, it's like, if you don't see it as like like a problem, then there's no reason for you to actually go towards it, go along with it. And so that's why not a lot of people don't really. I mean, that's why a lot of people kind of just kind of give up. It's like they don't see it as like something that's not intention. It's not reasonable or intentional. But then, like, if they don't go past that stage, then it's like it's impossible for them to kind of like to like move forward. So that's why pretty much, like, if they don't want to do the hard work. And so that's that's a big thing. A lot of people find themselves like kind of finding themselves going in circles about, because they have the ideas, but they don't really, they don't make it. They don't use, like, they don't have those ideas. They don't use those ideas to to make an impact. Where it's kind of like intention versus impact, where they have the idea of wanting to change, but they don't actually take the steps to actually do what it takes to move forward with those thoughts. And so that's why they never achieve them. That's why we eventually find ourselves kind of in that sort of rut, and life just kind of takes over for us, where we basically just live life, not you know not achieving the things that we said that we want to achieve. And a lot of those time moments, like, we have a lot of regret. And that's like, and it's not because we're lazy. It's just because we never really saw it at the time as like something very important to us, like something that we wanted to achieve in the first place. So that's kind of why a lot of people fall off the high end, and they have a lot of like excuses, and they have a lot of and I'm not trying to like I'm not trying to like put to shame anyone here, but this is just kind of like what I've I've noticed, and this is kind of like, what I've experienced myself too. So it's definitely, and definitely it's a norm. Like I said, it is, it's definitely something, like a lot of people have experienced before, and it's still something that I'm trying to, work through. Like because it's very easy to kind of like fall into like, procrastination, because we don't really see it as an importance to us. We don't really see it as a priority. So that's why, that's why we just kind of, do our own thing and do what every other normal person does. Just find a 9 to 5 job, or just take the easy route. I mean, well, I guess the easy route is the 9 to 5 job. So and they don't really do anything because outside of that. Um, so so that's what, for me. I'm still kind of like, trying to find out, like what I want to do and who I want to, be. Because obviously, I'm working towards my goals in terms of my career. Obviously as a PT, obviously, but the way to get there is definitely, you know, definitely requires a lot of discipline. Uh, Requires also, being smart. Being able to being able to keep track of, your progress, like and that's one thing. A lot of people, even for myself, like I struggle, like keeping, like progress of, like just reminding myself of how far I've gotten, because it's almost like counting your calories, right? Like you need, like, for example, like when you're about to just, like, make a meal, when you're about to enjoy your breakfast, like you have to count how many, you have to count how many servings, you got count how many calories are within those servings, and basically keeping a tracker, like on your phone, right, or on a notepad or whatever, and you're basically, counting how much. You're basically, trying to count how many calories that you're taking in just to lose weight or even gain weight, for those of you who are trying to build more muscle. And it's annoying, and I get that, because I kind of, was I've been there when I was trying to, like, build muscle, like actually, trying to, like, build muscle. Um and so it's kind of like that, and I realized that, I haven't always taken, like, the right steps to get there, because as of right now, it's like, I'm just kind of wanting to keep, I was more focused on, like, my mental health than anything during after I graduated college. So it was like I was trying to, like, kind of like avoid it almost. But now I realized that, you kind of have to take smarter steps. I realized you kind of have to be more, uh, be like kind of more strategic, as in when it comes to, like, reaching those goals, like they're like connected to those goals. Like, for example, like I was volunteering at places where that was outside of, like, what I wanted to do, instead of, like, trying to like volunteer in places that, like, that that coexist with my field of interest. Uh so right now I'm just kind of taking, like, steps to do that. um although the job that I have is, like, a little bit outside of PT. I mean, it's the skill is still, like, necessary to the skills there are, like, necessary for PT, but it's like, I took in jobs where it's mostly like a teaching role, where I'm teaching, kids, a certain subject, and learning to, like, kind of, build that sort of, like interpersonal, like those personal relationships, so I can help them to achieve and succeed in education. But when you kind of, like, translate that to PT, it's like you know, it's like you kind of use those skills to kind of help you talk to people, to be in a handle a conversation with them, knowing when to cut off, knowing when to move on to the next patient, So kind of building those social skills is, required in a PT in a clinical setting. And so, but also I think, one thing that I think I've really, really, I wouldn't say mastered, but like something that I'm really good at is like, researching. I like to read, like, uh, like pretty much like anything. So I like to be on my computer, I like to be on my phone, I like to take notes, I like to do all that kind of stuff. And because, those things are like, I think those things are, like they just help me to kind of keep track of what I need to do in order to reach that reasonable goal that I have. And although it's a lot of, work, it's a lot of like, it's a lot of time, being behind, your laptop, your MacBook, your phone, or whatever. I feel like it's still, like it's still like a very, like it's primitive to like, what I want to go for, and what I'm like kind of learning to how to do on my own, uh, just so I know like what field of PT do I want to go into. Like I've shown interest of wanting to do like, home health, or outpatient settings, um, where, I've been kind of like asking around, from certain people who are PTs, or who are, like who are, you know in the same, someone in the same branch. And so, like my peers. And so, um so that's something that I've been trying to do, is just like kind of building those relationships, and kind of like, taking the time to go out and my way and just talk to people and network more, um and just trying to get like the full, scope of what what PT looks like, of, from like, different, from, different fields and different branches of PT. So that's one thing that I've been like, pretty, good at. And so that's, and it does kind of help, to with like, your build like that resourcefulness, because it's basically, all around you. You can build, you can use those resources to help you to discover more and just explore, just so, you find yourself doing, find your strength, you find your, your strengths, versus like what you could improve on. Because I think, because we spend more time, on, on our strengths, more than we can improve, more than what we can improve on, which, it should be, the opposite, right? So that we can be able to kind of fix those, and kind of make some arrangements, and make some, some tweaks there, so that we can, you know, kind of refine ourselves, and try to go after, what we believe, is reasonable. So just kind of having that awareness, I think that, because having that lack, it's like having that lack of awareness just kind of creates a lot of like distortion, and it kind of, it kind of sets you up for, a huge, a huge setback. And so, um, that's why, it's all about, findings, discovering. It's all about, using what you have, using what you know, even to, to, to solve a problem. Because if you don't really actually experience it, I mean, obviously you're going to fail, right? And I think a lot of people also experience, the fear of failure, which is normal. I mean, I absolutely have a fear of failure, mostly just, just due to a lot of things in my life. Um, but, just due because I experienced a lot of that, like, growing up. And so, um, but, but it's like, it's part of the progress. It's part of the point of, getting better, of, being someone that you want to be. Um, and so that's, and it's normal. I think it's I think it's absolutely normal, because you can try something with all your might and with all your strength, but it's not gonna really. But in the end, like, it's you'll still fail. So just kind of being aware of that is, like, is is you know is kind of smart. Is It also kind of saves you. It also gives you, like, that grace, that relief that you need to kind of, like, get back on the horse. Because, like, if you don't give yourself grace, then you know how can you pick yourself back up again? And that's another thing that I'm also learning to kind of, like, do, is like, which I'll probably discuss a little bit more, like, in the future. I do a take on that in the future, but as of right now, it's right now I think learning to prepare yourself for failure is, it's also, it could be a good thing. It's it shows you, that you need to, work on certain areas of yourself, and in order for you to advance. And shows that, not everyone is, perfect in everything. That everyone, has, moments of, of being feeling defeated, or moments where you know they might have to go back to square one, which is, another thing. Like going back to the basics is definitely a hard thing for a lot of people, including myself, because if I've reached a certain point, throughout that journey, and it kind of brings you all the way back to, like, square one. It's like, you know, what the heck, right? Because, you made it this far, and now you have to go all the way back to the beginning to kind of, rebuild yourself, and sort of, like, do, obviously, you know do the not do the same thing over and over again, but, like, kind of reinvent yourself again. um and it does, and it does get frustrating, but if this is something you think is, like, if you believe that this is something that you want, that this is something that you know is important to you, then you're gonna do it, like, no questions asked. And and because that's where a lot of people, they find, their worth. They find a lot of their purpose in that. um they find a lot of, you know even a lot of their, their strength in that certain goal. And and they kind of want to, share that, with and they're willing to share that with others. And that's kind of like, how people, you know build relationships, you know through that, because it's also, like, an opportunity, because to kind of, to connect with people, even because everybody has a goal. Everybody, not just you, it's everyone. So it makes you more of an outgoing person. It makes you more driven to reach goals, and doing that with other people kind of helps. And that's something that I often find myself struggling with a lot, because I do things, on my own, and it it unfortunately doesn't work out, which is why I've learned to like kind of like talk to people more, ask for advice, ask for people with more experience that can help me reach my goals, and it just being staying in touch with them is like another thing. Like it's not always you can't always do everything by yourself. Like you gotta have to like go out of your way to ask to people, and just have that mindset where it's like you don't have all the answers. So yeah, I'm gonna ask someone else who might have what I'm looking for, because that's kind of like what that's an intelligent person would do. Is like you're not trying to like solve it on your own. It's like it's you're trying to like kind of because this is your life, this is your journey. It's how you want to see those goals come into fruition, and you're not going to always find it on your own. You're not going to always find it on from chat gpt or AI, or from all these different like websites or articles. They're I mean they can help in some ways, but like if you don't get like that face to face experience, and it's like how can anyone sort of like help you to like to sort of like how can you sort of like because you obviously you are your own worst critic. Like you are your own worst critic. And but if you ask from someone else, maybe they might have something to that you might need to hear, something you might actually even benefit from. So and so that's why I think relationships are important. Like building those relationships with people are important, because like we all have different goals, but maybe the way to get there is like it's in a way kind of like it's kind of similar, you can say. um and so that's why um so I don't think I don't so I think that both the two these two things are kind of similar in one way, but it's like one is like has a huge hold on a lot of people, because it's not that we are lazy. It's just like we just find ourselves in ruts, or in things that keep us from what we want to do and what we know we have to do, because the priority is in life is for us to find our purpose. And how we get there is definitely going to take a lot of experience and and knowledge as well. So that's why you can't really do you have to kind of embrace the change. You kind of have to embrace the hard work, because it's the only way that we can see change. The only thing we can see a reason to keep ourselves from staying in that same spot where we don't achieve anything. So that's these are just what I think about it. These are just things that I think about this certain topic. I don't know if any of you have felt the same way, but this is just kind of like what I feel towards it. So but yeah, that's just kind of like what I wanted to discuss a little bit on for today. So